think Metro is one of the responsible parties for why traffic is so bad in the metro area. They have been pushing back on capacity improvement plans to widen highways, build new highways. And their reasoning is environmental. They think that if they constrict the roads and make sure people can't get where they need to go, that fewer people will drive, and then therefore that's better for the environment. But the way I look at it, 10 or 20 years from now, we're all going to be driving electric vehicles, that kind of stuff. But Metro does have a lot of kind of soft influence on those things because it's the organization that manages all three counties. City council, there's think Portland. Right. Then you go up a level to county, Multnomah County, and then you go up a level from that is Metro, which does the tri-county area, and then up a level from that is state government, and then federal on top of that. So
that's Thank you, Yaroslav. Thank you for being here today. How you doing?
Yeah, good. So I'm going to do a little recap of what Slavic Vote is.
Yes, thank you.
I don't know if a lot of people have heard of us. I think they have. They've probably seen our logos all over the place.
Yeah, for those who might be tuning in for the first time.
If you've seen stickers on your fridges and all kinds of memorabilia, that's probably us. So we're actually a nonprofit organization, nonpartisan. Our main goal, we're actually 3 years old, so in politics we're pretty young. We're still learning, and that's why we have our wonderful guest today, is to learn. Yeah. So we started mainly doing registrations because we found a great need in the Slavic community. We realized that a huge percentage were citizens, but they haven't voted. Like myself, I was here since '89 and only started voting like 4 years ago. So that's the typical Slavic demographic right there for you. And then we moved on to more education, trying to educate people on, what happens after you vote, what can you do at a local school board, just entry positions that the Slavic community can participate in, or at least go and see what's happening in their communities. And then the third point of what we're trying to kind of achieve right now is to get people activated to actually go run for positions. And we've had limited success. Again, we're not pushing our specific agendas or anything like that. It's just we want people to be active in their communities. So the more local, the better. We're not asking people to run for president or anything like that, although you can. It's the United States. Anything can happen here, right? So that's what our organization does. And we're moving forward.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Well, we have a guest who has been active for a long time, and we met maybe 3 years ago.
Several years ago
at a meeting of sorts, and we had a great interaction. And I learned just recently you got married to a Romanian girl.
Yes.
I consider Romanian Slavic people.
She was born in Maramuresh, which is right on the Ukrainian border. Okay, so perfect. I've been paying very close attention to the situation in Ukraine right now.
Has she been affected at all by any of this?
Well, she's been here. She does have family that are still in Romania and Western Europe.
Her family.
I don't believe anyone directly affected, but it's definitely pretty close to where her family is.
Right, right. Well, thank you for coming on. Your name is James Ball.
Yes, James Ball.
Thank you. You're currently running for an interesting position that I think most people, when they open up their ballots and when they see this title, they're like, they probably don't think much about it because they don't know what it is. And that's why I wanted you to have today is to speak a little bit about that position specifically, and speak about other positions that, like water boards, and you're running for Metro.
Yes.
And then for other positions that most people don't really think about, and you are taking on that position, and you're going to help us understand that a little bit.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about, first of all, if you can tell me a little bit about yourself for our listeners, and where you're from, and what have you done before?
Yeah, so I'm a native Oregonian. I was born in Portland, here not too far from where we are currently sitting, actually, and grew up in Bend. I went to college in Salem. After that, I joined the Army. I was stationed at Fort Drum, New York, deployed a couple times with the 10th Mountain Division to Afghanistan, came back to Oregon, got a business degree at the University of Oregon, joined the Oregon National Guard, deployed a third time with the Oregon National Guard, all 3 times to Afghanistan, worked at Intel for 4.5 years as a financial analyst, and now I own a small garage door company, kind of based in Washington County. So I've got military, big business, and small business, all of the above. And let me tell you, they're all very different. But what I'm running for is Metro Council District 4. And so they're done by geography, and so District 4 is basically the northern portion of Washington County. kind of north of TV Highway. And what Metro is a regional government that sits between the county and the state level. So there are 7 members, 6 based on geography, and then the president is at large.
And the president is the mayor, or is this a separate board?
It's just the president of the
board.
council. That's the title. Yeah. So the 7-member board governs the Tri-County area, Multnomah, Washington, and Clackamas, and kind of have a limited scope compared to other jurisdictions. So they're not making laws about different things. It's really predominantly a land use and transportation planning council. They also do things like waste management. They manage the zoo. They manage a couple golf courses, the Expo Center, the Convention Center, the Portland Center for the Arts. So these are all Metro properties that the Metro organization manages. And most recently, they passed a bond to do low-income housing, and then another income tax to do to support homelessness services. So they are increasing their scope, and that's one of the reasons that I wanted to run for this position, is that I am by nature a conservative. I believe that the government should be as hands-off as possible. Not completely hands-off. That would be anarchy, but generally as light a touch as possible. And when you have this organization that is really going outside their charter, outside their scope, especially with those 2 measures, I want to slow that down and make sure government focuses on what that government is good at and what their core competency is. When you start doing things you've never done before, there's a learning curve, there's waste, there's all sorts of things that can happen. And I think Metro needs to roll it back a little bit.
Right.
So
all the homelessness and everything that's going on that people are always complaining about, is that strictly basically by Metro? Are they responsible for a lot of that, or is there other groups? I know that I believe Hardesty is also oversees that.
So the city of Portland spends a lot of money on homelessness. The Multnomah County spends a lot of money on homelessness. Washington County and Clackamas County spend some money, but less, because the Portland city center is really where it's all focused. But the city of Portland spent over $100 million on homelessness services in 2021. Wow. And so this bond, or excuse me, this tax from Metro is basically, Metro's going to collect the tax, and then the idea is then to distribute it to the different counties based on need and resources and all these sorts of things. And it just, again, this is something I don't oppose putting money toward homelessness services, but let's leave it to the people. Ideally, I would love to see it left to the people who've been doing this for a long time and know what they're doing, and not an organization that this is their first crack at it. So we can't really change it. The voters passed this, and so it's happening. And so now what I want to do is I want to go in there and make sure that money is going in the right place, and that it's going to the people who actually need it, and that the projects that we're funding are actually going to help people get off the street, and not like what Portland has done, spending over $100 million a year to maintain the status quo. That's basically what they're doing, is the point-in-time estimate of homeless people in the city of Portland has flat to up, despite spending hundreds of millions of dollars. So just spending money on a problem is not good enough. It needs to be spent in the right way, and that's what I want to do.
Do you see an issue? So you mentioned that the Metro Council, initially they were just doing land usage and then transportation. Were they doing those 2 things well that they wanted to add on more? Like usually, if you're working in the corporate world, if the department's doing something really good, they might think of adding, an additional, low-income housing is a huge...
It's a huge thing.
Chunk. I mean, are there like percentages, like this is taking this much money versus this much money or this much money? Have you looked into that yet? Or
I don't have so those are both voter approved. And
okay.
So I don't have the numbers in front of me, but
yeah.
I think Metro is one of the responsible parties for why traffic is so bad in the metro area. They have been pushing back on capacity improvement plans to widen highways, build new highways, Metro has been one of the major parties that has been pushed back against on those things, and their reasoning is environmental. They think that if they constrict the roads and make sure people can't get where they need to go, that fewer people will drive, and then therefore that's better for the environment. But the way I look at it, 10 or 20 years from now, we're all going to be driving electric vehicles. Like that's the direction the world is going. It's not necessarily Tesla, but I have a friend who is pretty plugged into GE, Purdue, that Rust Belt area. And he says GM, General Motors, has stopped R&D on the internal combustion engine. They are not doing any more research and development to build a gasoline-powered engine. All of their R&D is going toward electric. And so that's the direction things are heading, with or without government involvement. And so what we can do, what we should be doing, is trying to speed up that transition, make that transition as easy as possible. One of the main reasons that I don't drive an electric vehicle right now is I have nowhere to charge it. It's not convenient for me to charge it. So that's just something that the government can do, is finance or incentivize charging stations, so that as soon as charging stations are as ubiquitous as gasoline, fill-up stations, gas stations, I think that a lot more people will transition to electric vehicles. I think people like it. People want to do the right thing, especially when it comes to the environment. Yeah. And so if you just make it easy for them, they'll do it. But that requires more roads. People need to be able to use the roads, and if you're stuck in traffic, it doesn't help anybody. So I want to see capacity improvements on the road, and I want to see us start funding some charging stations.
Well, with these gas prices, I think everybody is going to want to get off the gas cars.
Right. Like I'm saying, people want to do the right thing. People are tired of paying for gas. But at the same time, it needs to be convenient to have an electric vehicle.
And when I think of Metro, I think of automatic transportation. And we briefly talked about this before this, but I'm assuming that you're not going to be responsible for making our gas cheaper, right?
No, that's going to be outside the scope of Metro. It's Planning Commission. They decide where the roads are going to be and build roads and that kind of thing. So. And
I know that you mentioned a little bit about PBOT things. Are you at all, or that position, are they at all working together with PBOT and specifically that?
They work together with a lot of those agencies. Again, there's multiple layers of government with different jurisdictions. And so a lot of the stuff you see here in Portland, the lane narrowing, the road diets, they're calling them. So that's going to be PBOT. Metro doesn't directly control that kind of stuff, but Metro does have a lot of kind of soft influence on those things because it's the organization that manages all three counties. There's discussions, and again, maybe Metro can't tell PBOT what to do, but there definitely is enough communication that there's influence there.
So let's break it down a little bit so I personally can understand. So we got city council, right?
Yep.
City councilors, they do their thing. We got Metro, they do their thing. And then there's, you might be able to help me with a few other, and if there is any other.
County in between those. County in between those. City council, think Portland.
Right.
Then you go up a level to county, Multnomah County, and then you go up a level from that is Metro, which does the Tri-County area, and then up a level from that is state government, and then federal on top of that.
So is that the hierarchy essentially? Mm-hmm. So is the city and Metro, or city and county, they report at all to the Metro?
Nope.
Or it's all separate, independent?
So they're all separate and independent. A lot of kind of the way that our government is structured, and this goes from the federal on down, is it's really kind of a bottoms-up type of thing. There are certain laws that are set at the federal level that apply everywhere, and same thing at the state, apply down lower. But for the most part, it flows from the bottom up. And so, for instance, concealed carry permits for handguns, different whatever state you're in, because there's no federal guideline, and so every state kind of does their own thing. Some provide reciprocity to others. And this is not Metro's jurisdiction at all. I'm just kind of explaining, but it's because it's an example of where you go state to state and the laws are completely different. So kind of the similar thing where there is cooperation between city, county, Metro, state, but a lot of the time it flows from the bottom up. And so the city council can tell Metro to,
Yeah.
go pound sand if they want. But there's also a lot. The bigger the jurisdiction, the more money they have. And so this is actually how the federal government does a lot of their control: is they collect all this money in taxes and then they redistribute it to the states. And that money then has strings attached to it. And so if you do X, Y, and Z, we will give you money. If you fail to do X, Y, and Z, we won't give you money. And so that's how the federal government, despite not having a whole lot of hard power, exercises that power. Interesting example of that, there is no federal law saying that the drinking age has to be 21 years old. But if a state were to change that and go to 18, for instance, they've cut off a bunch of federal money.
Oh, wow.
So it just, and the money that is totally unrelated to alcohol. It's just one of those things that the federal government decided this is what we're doing, and if you don't make the same law to comply, we're going to take all your money away. So Metro has some levers like that they can pull with different jurisdictions, but being a good government, guy, I like local control. I prefer to allow the lowest level jurisdiction to solve problems on their own if they're able to. So
Yeah. I think that's kind of what we realized after the last presidential election. A lot of people were like, "I'm done with politics," but then they didn't realize that in this at the same time that a lot of local elections did end up in
they
what
matter
would
a
be,
lot.
yeah, and like you would have a lot more control, and that's kind of the beauty of the system in the U.S. is that initially it was intended to be from bottom up, not the other way around.
Yeah.
I have a quick question. I know you kind of mentioned your background. You went from like you were in corporate, you're a private business owner right now. What made you get up one day and say, I want to get into politics? Because this is where the Slavic community is like, why is this young man getting into politics? We know it's definitely not a financial thing, but what makes people want to run? Did you see something that happened locally that was just...
Well, so I've been a registered Republican since I've been allowed to vote. I mostly just kind of voted. I didn't pay a whole lot of attention other than once every couple of years when the ballot came in the mail. But the more I got involved, the more I started to see kind of the dysfunction within both parties, Republican and Democrat, and decided that everyone, while people were leaving, they're so frustrated with what is happening. I kind of took the opposite approach, where I was like, I feel like I've got a lot to offer, and so I should come in and try to do everything that I can to make a positive impact on the community, and do so within the Republican Party. I think it is the responsibility of the Republican Party to kind of police our own, and the Democrats also. When conservatives or Republicans are fighting against left-wing extremists, or Democrats are fighting against right-wing extremists, all that really does is kind of stoke the fire and create more confrontation and more nastiness. I think Republicans really kind of need to clean up our own backyard, and Democrats do the same way. So that was the thing that kind of inspired me to get involved. This Metro's position became available. I really kind of like these wonky, oddball kind of things that Metro's responsible for. And it's a nonpartisan position, so I don't have to run as a Republican, even though I am still registered as one. I don't have to worry about somebody else's platform or somebody else's ideas. I can just be me. I can set my own platform. And so, yeah.
So I'm not from Oregon. I'm actually from Washington, Vancouver, over here across the pond.
The river.
Oh, I mean, I know they say like certain positions, because I know we had a couple people run for school boards and whatnot. And again, those are non-partisan either. But at the same time, it still kind of seeps into, because the solution that you're providing for the city. So I know that Portland is more on the liberal side, which, I mean, it's fine to an extent if that's what the people are voting for. Do you see, like right now, is everything kind of stacked against the more conservative in these positions where it's nonpartisan, but at the same time, you have more of a liberal kind of
it
atmosphere.
It depends entirely on where you are. And so this is something that I think is kind of a misconception. A lot of people think the best candidate wins, and that's really not the case. You think you pick a sport, and if you trade jerseys, the same, the other team wins because it's the jersey, the players dictate whether or not they win. The jersey just kind of is separates who's who. In politics, it's the opposite. The jersey determines who wins. So if you swap jerseys, you a lot of times you'll lose, and that's because so many people just vote party line. They vote, Democrats vote for Democrats and Republicans vote for Republicans, and so you're really only fighting for 3 to 5% of the vote, maybe. So if your registration is further off than about 55, 45, if you're on the lower end of that, you have to be a really, really, really good candidate, or the other guy gets or the other girl has some sort of scandal and you get lucky. For a nonpartisan race, it's a little bit different. I think in my particular one, I don't think anyone's going to be confused about who's the conservative and who's the liberal, based on he's got a whole bunch of Democrats endorsing him. I'm fairly, upfront about being registered Republican, so people are going to know. What was your question?
So, I mean, the reason I even asked this is, the reason I even asked the question, because again, we're not a nonpartisan organization, but we do kind of try to instill in the Slavic community that, again, look at what the person's done, look at where the person's been, how he's voted in the past, couple of years, versus, what party they're in. And we're finding that a lot of times some candidates that are from, let's say, the Democrat side are more qualified for the specific positions. The reason this is so important with a position like yours, for example, is because it affects everybody that lives locally in that district or District 4. The reason I'm even saying this is because, for example, I actually grew up in Oregon City, which is Oregon area. And we were trying to divide land, which kind of falls under the land usage and permitting. And I don't know, am I allowed to say some words on the radio that are? But
that's one of the things.
It was impossible. You pretty much would have to get lawyered up in order to do get any kind of movement on any kind of land division or permitting. And people on a daily basis run into this.
So we have a housing shortage in the metro area to the tune of 70 or 80,000 homes, I think, is what I read recently. Wow. And so basically there's a supply and demand imbalance. There are more people who want homes than are homes available. And so what happens, Econ 101, prices go up, which is what we're seeing. 40% increase in a year in home prices is absolutely insane. It's partially that is what you're talking about, is when you make it so difficult to divide land or to build on land, we're talking tens of thousands of dollars just in fees to be able to even apply to build something on land. The permitting process takes months to divide land. There are all sorts of accessory dwelling units so ADUs are like if you want to build a small cottage, I guess, basically on your land next to your house, it's incredibly expensive because Portland, for some reason, doesn't want to do that. So all these things stacked on top of each other, the permitting, zoning, fees, things taking forever, just puts more barriers in place to people who want to build homes. And so they just don't. Once you do the math, it doesn't pencil out, and so people don't. We end up with a supply shortage. Yeah. So this is one of those things where decisions that we made, decisions that Metro made 10, 20, 30 years ago are affecting us now. And so it's kind of frustrating because, people would look at me and be like, well, what are you going to do to fix this? It's like, well, the best thing to do is go back in time 20 years and fix the problem before it starts. You can start building houses now, but it's going to take a while to build 80,000 homes. Plus you got to find the land. There's all sorts of barriers, and it's going to take a long time. So it still needs to be done, but it's not going to fix things overnight because we've neglected this problem for so long.
Right. And you probably partly answered my next question, but we have listeners, families and parents who have kids, and they're concerned about their children and their education. And when they see this kind of position, I mean, a lot of times I think they check out and they don't even think how does that affect me, or how is this important for me, and why should I even vote for this position, let alone this whole election. What would you say to someone like that who don't think that it's important, and how would you tell that person, this election, first of all, is important, and these positions are also important. They affect that person as well.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what I just talked about is a lot of it doesn't affect you right away. Land use and transportation planning, right. Nobody thinks about that as a hot button political issue.
Right.
But wait, if you do it poorly for long enough, it will start to affect you. So I would encourage those people to open up your voter's pamphlet, read about the candidates, pick the person who you think aligns more with your values, and vote for them. Do a little bit of research. I mean, this is what's great about Oregon is they mail it to your house. You get this packet, and everybody gets a 325-word statement, and you can see what they have to say about themselves. And it saves you a lot of. You don't really have to do a whole lot of additional research. That should give you a pretty good bite-sized chunk to tell who you want to vote for.
Right.
So, yeah, I would encourage people to pick it up and read it and vote.
Right. Our time is flying quickly, so I just want to do a quick sponsor plug just to thank some of our sponsors that have been so gracious giving us finances and to be here and do the work that we do. So some of the ones I want to just do a quick shout out is Pilmeni is one of our longtime sponsors, America Best Realty, Solution 8020, Ciberoni, and Third House Media, which is one of our newest sponsors, and we appreciate all of them. We couldn't be here without them, and the work that we do is crucial with their support. So if you recognize any of those brands or names and you want to support them, that's always encouraged, and we encourage you to look them up and give some of your business to them because they do some good work. And Pilmeni is obviously a big one in our community. Have you ever had Pilmeni before? You have a Romanian wife. I would imagine she probably knows either how to make them or she had them before.
Probably.
Right.
Yeah.
So speaking of Romanian and your wife, how did you guys ever meet?
We met at church.
Okay.
Yeah, we were volunteering together at church,
Awesome.
and so
Was it a Romanian church?
No, actually, she grew up at a Romanian church here in East Portland, and I think as people hit their mid-20s, they tend to go looking for more American churches, and so that's what she did. She started coming to the church that I had been going to for several years. I was working on the safety team, and she came over, and I like to tell people that she saw me working on the safety team and decided I need to go meet that guy. She's not here to defend herself, so that's not true. She got set up with me by chance, but started dating, and a couple years later got married.
Awesome. Yeah, we had I've met her, and she's definitely a great gal. And so congratulations and
thank you.
So my next question was, what would you tell? We talked about this already to the community. We're going to slowly start transitioning to close this program, but the midterms are coming up. This position is going to be on the midterms, but specifically, I think this one is going to be also on the primary election.
Yes.
Because we talk about the primaries quite a bit, but we don't always do a great job at maybe breaking down and what the primaries is. Can you take a moment to talk a little bit about what is a primary election? Because everybody thinks about November, right?
Right.
But nobody ever thinks about the primaries. So the one thing we always talk about is you have to be registered in order to vote for the governor candidate. Luckily, if you're not registered with a party, you can still vote for James or his other candidate. We're not going to tell you who to vote for. But if you're not registered with a party, you're only going to see James and a few others, but you're not going to see the governor candidate. So that's why we make a big deal about being registered with a party. But talk a little bit about the primaries, maybe why that is the case, and just in general.
So you did a good job of talking about the partisan races. This one being a nonpartisan race is a little bit different. And so the way that Oregon does nonpartisan races is anybody can join. Any number of people can put their name in. For my race, there's only two. For Metro District 1, there's only one person on that. So they're basically going to win no matter what. And what they do then is if no one gets a majority, So no one gets 50% plus one. Then there's a runoff in November between the top two. So a good example of that is 2 years ago, the Portland mayor, there were probably 16 people on the ballot. Ted Wheeler got 40.1%. Sarah Iannarone got 36%. I'm making numbers up, but it's something like that. And then everybody else got less than that. And so since neither candidate got more than 50%, there was a runoff in November between Ted Wheeler and Sarah Iannarone. And so that's similar to mine. In my race, there's only two people. And so whoever wins will necessarily have 50%. So there will not be a runoff in November. This is the end. This is the end of my race, is win or lose in May. And so it's really important. And that's city council, that's county commission, that's metro. There's a lot of these nonpartisan local positions that this is it. This is the only time you get to vote for these people, probably, unless it's a big position like Portland mayor and that gets kicked out to the end. But it's really important, and you get lower turnout in midterm election or in primaries, and I think that's kind of too bad because it's really important.
Right. And I try to make it a big deal about just voting in the primaries, because a lot of times we have people who open the ballots and look at the two candidates and they're like, where's all the good candidates? Or a lot of times, where's the more conservative candidate, for example, or whatever. And when I look at the candidates in the primaries, you see some really, really good candidates, but unfortunately they're not popular enough, or they don't have enough funding to be on that general election. So they lose out and they don't vote. People don't vote and they don't get to actually be in the general election, or they don't win it at all. So that's usually how I try to explain. These primaries is one of the, probably more important than general election a lot of times. I want to take a moment to thank all of our sponsors for allowing us to be here on this program and all of our future programs. Some of those sponsors are Pilmeni, Nina Martina, a real estate broker, America's Best Realty, Exceptional Homes, Dream House Construction, Imperial Cabinets, Solution 8020, Gold Cup Coffee House, Red Hills Construction, Ciberoni, Lanos Floral, Third House Media, and some others. Without these companies, without these organizations, we couldn't be on this program. And if you would like to be our next sponsor, reach out to us by visiting slavicvote.org. We would love to partner with you and further our mission. Thank you very much. One thing that makes these elections easier is we try to put out some material to help people vote. And in the past, we've done voter guides, and I think you've probably been in one of them before. Because we'll talk about. I'll have a question for you next. What have you ran before? Because I know you ran before for another position.
I ran for state representative in 2020. Yeah.
Right. So I know we had you on our voter guide before, and I think you were the top guy on there. So a lot of people voted for you.
Thank you.
Based on our voter guide, and this year we're doing a little bit differently, where we're actually endorsing, and not us specifically, and not Slavic Vote. We don't endorse candidates, but you guys have heard before of an organization called SV Action. Lily has been working hard at trying to get that organization up to then so she can start endorsing. So we'll see. That's something that you talk to her about, and we can connect you with Lily as well. But essentially, in order to vote for you, or in order to make this process easier, we have these tools at hand to make the whole election process easier. So how would you?
That's excellent.
How would you tell people? How would you guide people to make the whole voting easier? How did you start voting, and what are some of the tools that you would have? You would recommend people to use? Yeah,
I mentioned it before, but the voters pamphlet statement, or the voters pamphlet, is really the biggest thing. So I mean, what I do is I will sit down with my ballot, and I take the book, and I'll look at a race, person A and person B, and then I find them in the book, and person A, they gave their little statement, and person B gave their statement, and I'll find the person that I think aligns with my values, and I'll vote for them, and then go on to the next race. And it only takes an hour maybe, but that is much better than just picking someone because you like their name, or maybe you saw a billboard, or but actually seeing what they say about themselves. I mean, you could also give you guys a plug, a voter guide from an organization that you trust is also another really good resource. You can also find a voter guide from from an organization that is completely opposite to you, and you know who not to vote for. So I've done that before.
Right.
I was like, oh, you endorsed this person? Oh, I'll vote for the other one.
So you look, if you're a conservative, you would look for candidates, for example, that, let's just say, I don't know,
Like
abortion.
vote.org.
Yeah, or if you, in general, like Planned Parenthood websites, right? If you don't support abortion, you would look at those candidates and the ones that are supported by Planned Parenthood, and then you know not to vote for them.
Right, or NARAL, or some other organizations like that. Yeah. So if they support one candidate, then you could vote for or against that one based on. Oregon Right to Life would be the flip side of that. If you wanted to follow their, because they endorse and they give money too. So those are some organizations.
How do you vote, Yannick? What's some of your tricks?
I actually go through the guide. Before we had the guide that Lily offered, we as an organization actually, we did a poll initially when we first started. So we got all those Slavic values, and most of them were fairly conservative. And we actually did we had a branch in Slavic Vote that actually did all the filtering through. Like they would try to meet up with each candidate, call them, and sit down with them, and we had a couple questions we asked them, and that's what we put in the sheet and made a nice little graph for people so they can just kind of look at it. Oh yeah. So we did a 1 to 10 numbering system for them, which it kind of worked out because prior to that, I was like stalking people on Facebook and all kinds of stuff because some people, I don't want to bring up the example of the person, but you would find them on YouTube or something like that, and there's a lot of sources you can use, but the time spent, especially for some of the elections, you can spend a good evening, 2 or 3. I've actually probably spent about 3 evenings sometimes after work, just going through and figuring out who's who, especially on a lot of the national and even state election lists, what we would call them. They don't go low as council members for cities or districts. They don't go that low in providing information. Like, okay, this is a conservative, this is more liberal. Usually they don't.
Oh, the voter guides.
Yeah, the voter guides. They don't go that low, and that's what we kind of realized because we don't want to reinvent the wheel.
Right.
We want to use what's there already. So we did have to kind of do deep dives.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Which
is good.
I'll say it again. The voter pamphlet has what the person says about themselves, and so you can kind of glean what they feel their values are and what sets them apart just from. You'll get it in the mail if you're a registered voter. The city, state, or I think counties run elections, so the county will mail you. It's that little yellowish, very cheap paper. Yeah. It's about
Yellow
that thing.
Pages.
Yeah. And that's got everybody's statement in it.
Right.
So,
and I'll repeat almost the endorsements. You tell a lot of things.
Yes.
By who
they got endorsed. Yeah.
So definitely, that's what I use a lot of times, and they're right there in that book under the same person's name. So, so that's always a great tool. So we talked a lot about Metro. There's plenty of other positions that are on there that are similar, maybe to the point of like people don't think they're important. Like water board is a common one, I think. Remind me a few others perhaps, and speak a little bit about those, why those are important, and maybe the differences or.
Yeah, so I'm not really an expert on some of the other ones. Water board is something I looked into that at one point, and you have to live in a very specific area because there's only there's a very narrow watershed or something that is managed by that water board. And in Portland, they're not that many of them, and they're small in geography. So you have to live in a very specific place to run for that. School board is a much bigger one. If you care about education. There's also things like community college board of directors. Those are elected positions.
I think I ran for the PCC one last year.
Yeah, you did. So school board is a really good way to kind of get your feet wet especially if you have kids and you're concerned about those sorts of things. It doesn't take a whole lot to put your name in. Usually there's only 1 or maybe 2 people running for it, so you have already a fairly good shot. If you are plugged into your community and you know people and you have a kind of a base of support, you can win those seats. And I don't know how often. It probably depends on which board or which school board, but
probably meet once a week at most to talk about, and they hire the superintendent, and you can kind of keep an eye on what's going on in that school district.
Well, for me personally, why I think those positions are so important, a lot of times, they deal with budgets. And this money, a lot of times, are distributed to different groups or different things, different essentially categories that a lot of times, especially nowadays in Portland, they sometimes go to some radical ideas, some radical, things that a lot of times our community doesn't agree with. And this money could have been distributed to somewhere that would be more for education, that would support more education, but instead they go a lot of times to just some radical things that we would disagree against. So,
or like administration is
administration is definitely a big one, but there's probably some things like having safe spaces and things like that. I mean, we're not gonna get into that, but I don't know if that's probably cost money to put together a safe space, and I don't know if the board even deals with that. But that's just an example. For example, the money goes to some things that we would disagree with.
So a lot of it is similar to like a board of directors at a corporation. Right. And so think of your superintendent as kind of your CEO. They run everything, but the superintendent is hired by the school board. The school board is kind of your board of directors. So the school board has some oversight over the superintendent, who then the superintendent runs things. They don't have day-to-day insight, but at the same time they can direct things, and they can, if need be, they can fire the superintendent and hire a new one if they don't like what he's doing or she's doing. So they have a lot of power, but without you don't need, like a superintendent, you need to have a lot of experience. You need to have been in the education field for a long time to actually know what you're doing and be effective. But as a school board, you just kind of need to have a general idea of what's going on. And then you can, if you have a good superintendent, you can rely on them to kind of guide you through the rest of it.
Well, I would imagine, and we talked a little bit about, I brought up water boards. I mean, I would imagine, just from the top of my head, that there probably some of the budgeting that goes with that. I mean, I'm imagining some climate change stuff. I mean, some stuff
probably,
they're probably funding some things that, again, we wouldn't completely agree with. They'd probably go somewhere more effective, but because people who are on these boards, they oftentimes have this idea of climate change that a little bit too radical for maybe most of us, or myself at least, and then they want to fund different ideas that would go towards that. And to say the least, I mean, I'm sure there's other things that we don't know about that they do.
Yeah, and nobody knows about these positions.
Right.
So if you don't feel like you have a lot of experience or a lot of knowledge about what a water board is, or even a school board, don't feel bad. Nobody knows what they're doing. The first the first 3 to 4 months they're in these positions, legislature, Congress, Senate, president, nobody really knows what they're doing. You just kind of have to figure it out.
Yep, and even though these positions are technically nonpartisan, there's a lot of politics going on in these positions.
Yep.
I mean, it's some of the most interesting things that go on. So when people don't think that this is a very big deal, it's just a water board or whatever, there's a lot of stuff that goes on that's political that you don't know about.
And a lot of people will use those as a stepping stone to higher office. And so you'll see a lot of legislators who started at school board, and then they went to city council, small city council, and then they went to legislature. And so that's how you build your resume. And you were talking earlier about, what do you, when you're looking at candidates to support or whatever, you look at their resume and what they've done. This is how people build their resume, is they start at these kind of lower levels where there's not a whole lot of competition, and then they build that support, and then by the time they're ready to run for legislature or something, they have a much better chance at winning.
Right. So you go around the city and counties, and you talk to a lot of people. What are some of the people talking about that they are concerned about around the state or around their city?
The number one thing is homelessness. The homelessness crisis is a humanitarian crisis at this point. I start talking about transportation, and people eyes glaze over. I'm like, didn't you get stuck in traffic on the way over here? And they're like, whatever. So they care a little bit. And like I said, it's one of those things that you can fix now that is going to take 20 years to really kind of flesh out and really impact the people's lives in a positive way. But homelessness, that is something people see all day, every day. And, we're spending, like I said, prior to this metro income tax, we were spending hundreds of millions of dollars, and now we're going to spend hundreds more million dollars. Hundreds.
Yeah. Can you repeat that number again? I think a lot of people, the number that you mentioned earlier.
The city of Portland last year, just the city, spent $117 million on homelessness services.
And we don't really see much change, right?
There was no.
It's getting worse.
There was no improvement. There was no improvement.
So-
And so this new tax is going to provide $250 million per year for 10 years, and that's through the whole metro area. So not just
So where
Portland.
is this money going anyway? What are they doing if things are not improving?
Well, that's a good question.
I mean,
It's a lot of it is
admin or?
health. I mean, a lot of it is going to admin. It's health and safety. It's providing socks and tents, and kind of the way I see it is making people comfortable, which I don't is important, but it should not be the number one goal. The number one goal should be to figure out the root cause of why these people are on the street and help them get over those barriers, and so that they can transition back into society. Making people comfortable while they're living in a situation that is detrimental to their health and well-being is not compassionate. Comfort is not compassionate. Helping people actually get out of the situation, that's true compassion. And that's what I want to do, is get people off the street and back, transition back into society.
Right. And I don't think we actually mentioned the date of the primaries.
May 17th.
May 17th.
Yeah, so
Right.
ballots should arrive in your mailbox, I believe, 3 weeks prior to that. So
I
look
think
for
the
them.
pamphlets come like a week before that even.
Yes.
About a
So
month.
the end of April is when this stuff should start showing up in your mailbox.
Yeah. Awesome. Any questions before we start closing?
So let's say somebody's listening to this radio station and they're saying, that's an interesting position. First of all, is it a paid position?
Yes.
Okay. And then how much time are you thinking of this is you'll have to allocate for this?
I believe
Is it
it's
a full-time job?
It's meant to be part-time.
Okay.
It's meant to be part-time, and I believe it's kind of billed at about 15 hours per week. I'm sure it'll take more or less depending on what's going on. I know that over this past summer, the Metro Council had canceled a bunch of meetings because people were on vacation, and so I don't think they met for 2 months. But then in busier times, they're meeting much more frequently. So and there's stuff to do offline, not just in meetings. There's working sessions and there's other stuff to do. So I think 15 hours a week is probably a minimum.
And what do you see your first week and month like on the job?
Honestly, it's going to be a lot of learning. Like I said, nothing can prepare you for an elected position. As much research as you do about the way things work, it's different being in it, and nothing can really prepare you for it. So listening, a lot of learning, a lot of setting things up, getting to know stakeholders, and then asking questions. Like I said, why are we doing things the way we're doing them? How can we get started on some of these homelessness projects that I think will help people get out of the system that they're in?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to take much more time on the subject of homelessness, but it is they say the elephant in the room, just because we see it. I mean, I see the battles because I drive from Washington across 205, and I see them clean up Marine Drive. Next week it's back again.
It's back,
clean
yeah.
up, then they write an article about it, and it's back again.
Yeah.
So we see the battle. It's just people are kind of thinking is politics going to really fix this issue? My question is, are we looking at other solutions, maybe other states that don't have the issue, and be can we incorporate this into Oregon somehow? What's the issue that you're seeing, the main roadblock, I guess?
Well, I think a wrong focus is the biggest thing. If you look at some of the rhetoric coming out of specifically Multnomah County or the city of Portland, a lot of what the thing they keep repeating is that this is a affordable housing issue, that people are on the streets because they missed a rent payment and got evicted, and if we just get people back into stable housing, that all of their problems will go away. I don't believe that. I believe that, and maybe that's how they got on the street in the first place, but once you're there and you're living in the cold and the wet and you're getting a lot of these people are addicted to drugs. A lot of them have mental health issues. You can't just take that person and throw them in a hotel room and expect all of those other issues to get fixed themselves. So you really need a comprehensive solution where you are bringing people into a shelter, you're addressing their individual needs, and essentially working with them to graduate from that program and into stable housing. You need that temporary intermediate step to work on these people's issues, because there is no one size fits all solution. You cannot just throw everybody in a house and expect it to work. So the idea that I've been kicking around is using something like the Expo Center, which is already already owned by Metro, already managed by Metro, and so all you'd need to do is rebook the people who are already booked there, and set up cots and wall lockers. When I was in Afghanistan, that's how I lived, is a cot and a wall locker in a 10 by 10 square, and you just flood the area with social workers and all of the different capacities that would be needed, and work with people on an individual level. Keep track of them, keep track of their medication, keep track of their appointments, and again, once they're stable enough that they can transition back to society, then that's when you talk about affordable housing, or get them into something stable so that they can have an address, they can apply for work. Job training is another thing that could happen here. But I think it needs to be all at once, and it needs to be all in one location, and it needs to be in a place where people aren't just sitting in tents waiting for affordable housing that never arrives. Because that's what we're doing.
And utilizing what we have already instead of trying to build something.
Exactly. And
somebody's neighborhood.
Expo Center is an idea. I've heard people kick around. Port of Portland has some big buildings that are
Lloyd
not
Center,
being
right?
used.
Isn't that also been part of conversation? Lloyd Center?
Possibly. I think, and I don't want to just like poo-poo on the idea, but I think Lloyd Center has a lot of nooks and crannies that might be difficult to manage, whereas the Expo Center, it's just big open rooms. So, I mean, when you have a population that is maybe a little bit hostile and maybe wants to go find a corner to shoot up or something, you kind of minimize the corners.
One thing that I always try to think about, I know it's easy to blame the government for not doing things, but can we, us, maybe just people or Christians, can we take part of the responsibility? Because I feel like, as Christian or as people, we should be also out there, not just relying on the government. Maybe that's part of the problem. We rely too much on the government, and we have these issues now. We have to take on some of this responsibility ourselves. Maybe not the church, but maybe
working with
people.
nonprofits. I think that's
Nonprofits,
what
things like that.
Portland heavily relied on, because we worked with a couple homeless people locally, and actually from Oregon, and there's really good programs that are already in place, that they're already working. Well, kind of the example that I like to use is a place called Bybee Lakes Hope Center, and it was the former Wapato. I heard of that,
So they have Helping Hands is the name of the organization that runs
That's
it.
up at the coast?
So they started on the coast. The one I'm referring to, so same organization, different facility, but it's up here in I believe Northeast Portland, but it's kind of out a ways, and they've got this system where it's all on site, kind of exactly what I'm talking about, kind of, but on a smaller scale, and they're entirely privately funded. So I don't want to speak for them. I'm not real plugged in with the organization, but I'm sure they're looking for volunteers, for money, for food, those sort of things. So yeah, I think that would be a way to help the situation, is find an organization like that. I would caution, there are a lot of people who I believe are trying to do the right thing, but what they end up doing is just enabling. And so, like I said, we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars to basically keep people comfortable while they stay on the street. And I think it's important to be careful not to let that be the only thing that we're doing. And so people, I think, default to handing out socks and blankets or serving food, and those things are important, but we do them because it's the easiest thing to do. It's the easiest way to help people.
Quick fix.
It's a quick fix, but at the end of the day, you're not. Their situation is the same as when you started. So I think it's important to be careful that is not the only thing we're doing. And this, I think, requires a bigger organization such as the government to come up with these comprehensive programs that, again, work to get people off the street,
Right.
because it takes months or years to deal with to get to know a person and work through all of the trauma and addiction and mental health and get them to a place where they can, again, transition and contribute to society. So that's a bigger commitment than I think your average volunteer has the energy for, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But
is there one organization, one particular council that's strictly responsible for this particular issue, or is there multiple, like Metro and then City Council?
multiple. And so this is
You can't
kind of
pinpoint one particular person to blame.
well. So the money flows to a lot of different places, and so the purpose of this Metro tax is that Metro collects the money, the counties then bid for the money, then the money is distributed to the counties. The counties then do a similar process where they make the cities bid on it with whatever project. They say, hey, I need $10 million for X project. And they say, okay, here's your $10 million. And then the cities go out to different nonprofits. So they basically contract out the work to nonprofits. And every time this movie changes, or this money changes hands, everybody takes a little piece, because part of it, I don't want to just blame the whole thing on corruption, but it takes administration. When you're looking at bids and you're handing out grants, it takes someone to actually go and go through all that stuff. And so my frustration with this Metro bill is you're now at 4 layers. It goes to Metro, then it goes to the county, then it goes to the city, then it goes to the nonprofit. So that's 4 different layers of government essentially that are all taking an administrative cut out of this money. And it's money that really should be going to people on the streets rather than just getting eaten up by bureaucracy.
So it sounds like in this particular example, Metro holds a lot of power essentially in order to solve this issue.
Yep.
Is there a way to cut all those, let's say those layers, and just have Metro do all that directly?
Potentially. I would have to. I mean, this is the questions that I plan on asking when I get elected: is how can we cut out some of this bureaucratic middlemen? But then you're taking you're taking jobs away, but you also need
Union's not going to like that.
you need a much bigger staff at Metro, because now you're dealing with individual projects instead of dealing with 3 stakeholders, 3 counties. Now you're dealing with 100 different stakeholders all vying for the same money, and so you need much more people to deal with it. Like it's complicated.
Right.
So, but this is kind of what I was thinking with the Expo Center. If Metro could sponsor a major project like that, you don't really need as all of those agencies, bidding on the same money. You take, okay, well, this chunk of money is going toward this major project, and you just have to manage that one project.
Right.
So I think you've got a lower administrative cost, and I think that really is the way to help people transition back into society, because that really needs to be the goal. It's making people comfortable and having them live on the street until affordable housing or permanent housing is available. Those 2 things are what we're currently doing, and those 2 things have failed our homeless citizens. So,
well, in closing, and we're pretty much wrapping up here. The one thing I like about you is instead of just sitting and complaining like a lot of people do, you go out there and you actually roll up your sleeves and actually try to make a difference. So, and this is what we're trying to talk about, to getting more involved, to either running for local office or looking for nonprofits to get more involved with. Just find ways where you could get plugged in and actually be the change and not be just someone that complains. Or
definitely,
people do leave the state, and eventually that issue is going to be found there as well as more people move there. So leaving or not being active is not the answer.
Absolutely.
Getting involved and running for these positions, or just helping, for example, yourself, your race, for example. And speaking of helping, how can people learn more about you, and how can they maybe help you out more financially or volunteer? Yeah,
so my website is jamesaball.com. Don't forget the A. If you go to jamesball.com, it goes to the wrong place. And that's probably a good place to get started. I've got some of my policies on there, some different media. I'm also on Facebook, Instagram. You can shoot me your email address. I'll add you to my mailer. But yeah, I think jamesaball.com is probably the best place to get started.
Okay, and I know you're active on social media, so they can always message you directly and
Yep.
ask questions, and if they want to get plugged in your race, for example.
I've got my cell phone number on the website. If you want to call me, give me a call.
Perfect.
I won't put it out on the air, but you can go look it up if you want.
Perfect. And I know you have once in a while you have meet and greets. People can actually meet you as
Yep.
well. That's I believe that's coming up Monday. That could be an
So that's
opportunity.
more of the one on Monday is more of a private-ish
Private,
event.
okay.
We are having another one on the 7th of April. And so if you would like to email me, james@jamesaball.com, if you'd like to attend, it's going to be out in Hillsborough somewhere. We're still working on the venue, but tentatively scheduled for April 7th. That one's going to be more open to the public.
Right.
So
Sounds good. Any last
Awesome.
thoughts, Eric?
We're good.
Perfect. Well, we're going to have events, like I mentioned in the beginning of the program. We have events that are coming up that candidates like James Ball and others are welcome to come and be there and be a part of that. And you can always meet them and get to know them a little bit. And at the same time, learn something different, learn something new. So some of those dates are coming up. I want you to remember just a few dates. And you can find this information on our website. And our social, you can learn more about that. And all of our programs are found on YouTube, social media, our website. Like I said, you can find everything there. So thank you very much. Thank you for tuning in. You were listening to Slavic Vote Live. Yaroslav, thank you very much for being here. James, thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
And we'll stay in touch. Have a great day. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to Slavic Vote Live. I really appreciate you listening to this program. Don't forget to click that like button, subscribe, and share this program with your friends and family. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much and have a great day.
Кандидаты. Стремление. Новая программа Slavic Vote Live. Каждую неделю. В прямом эфире. Slavic Vote Live. Дает голос славянской общине по всему.